Hello, this is the Harboring Light. I'm Mary. I give a conservative perspective about the world around me. So before I get into everything, I want to give another shout out to and much thanks to the sponsor, Matcha. Can't stress enough that wellness is very important. And if you don't have your health, I can't stress enough, what else is there? And it's great to know that there's a company out there like Matcha that understands the implements of health and well-being and the aspects of what you put in your body really fortifies you. So, like I said, they have so many wonderful selections. As I said on Wednesday's podcast, I mean, it's just fabulous. Should go and check it out. And also, to add on to this, you use the promotion code that I have, which is the Harboring. You get a 15% discount. Isn't that wonderful? All right, so check out the link and give it a try. All right, so some of the audio platforms that I'm on Speaker, Spotify, Pandora, iHeartRadio, Amazon Music, Deezer, just to name a few. And also, feedback and comments is immensely important. I appreciate all of you out there that listen to me. And feel free to weigh in and discourse. Feel free. The best way to do that is through email. And I greatly appreciate those who have done so. All right, so it's Friday, so I'm reaching out to all of you. This time, I'm focusing in on the Polish language. Here we go. And its origin. Here we go.
Zdrowaś Mario, laski spełnia Pan z Tobą, błogosławiona z Ty między niewiastami i błogosławiony owoc żywota Twojego Jezus, Święta Mario, Matko Boża, módl się za nami grzesznymi teraz i w godzinę śmierci naszej. Amen.
All right, so before I dive in, I'm going to give some thoughts here, and then, I'll weigh in and give more thoughts here. But the origin of different language, particularly when you get in the aspects of what was the cultural basis of everything. And it shouldn't be this way, but most of the times, as I mentioned in other previous podcasts, it seems as if, especially in today's climate, but it used to be a jargon where it says, these are the topics that you don't discuss at work. And the number two things that you talk about is either religion, politics, and then add on to this war or something like that. So how does these things implement itself in the aspects of language? I can't stress enough with the aspects that language is really an indicator of the reasoning or the how people actually view themselves in their world that they're looking at. And the way that people express themselves with their language really is an indicator of that. So what happens when most primarily the origin of the language is in the context of something when it goes into religion? And then, I'm right here, baby. Piper, I'm right here. You want to come here? Piper. When you get in the context of everything that goes with that. And so, globally, religion is, quite different from what religion is seen in the American context of everything. There's a lot more freedom when the aspects of how people view things when it comes to these issues. Well, I don't consider them issues, spirituality, but I mean in the issues of the aspects of moral codes of, there's a strict line between, there's no ambiguity. It's, it is what it is. And there is some, discourse of talking about the aspects of what is real versus what is not, and the metaphorical aspects and the identity of that. When you get into the parables of Jesus and so forth and all these things. So it's really interesting when, specific religions distinct themselves because of, different shifts in beliefs and something innovating them or inspiring them to have different views and to expand that out into the way they express and think, and then cultivate and change the way that their language is thought of, and to help them move along to the next progression in the culture of which it came from. So with this said, I'm going to get into the origin and aspects of Polish language. Here we go. Okay, and of course, sources will be provided for you in this episode. So let's get right down to it here. All right. So, okay, here we go. It says that the Polish language originated from the Proto-Slavic language spoken by Slavic tribes in the Eastern Europe around the 5th and 6th centuries. So it belongs to the West Slavic branch of the Slavic languages, which also includes Czech and Slovakia. So the separation of Polish as a distinct language is conventionally dated to the second half of the 10th century, closely linked to the establishment of the Polish statehood and the Christianization of Poland under, forgive me for the pronunciation, Mieszko I, who united various tribes from the banishes of the Vistol and the Oder rivers. Now, this period marked the transition from the oral tradition to a written form as the adoption of Christianity is introduced in the Latin alphabet. So, this is very intriguing to the aspects of how profound faith can be into changing the shape and the identity of, that goes without saying, but it's how profoundly embarking faith, particularly Christianity, is into the civilization of people. And this is a prevalent example of that. And so, it's unfortunate that Christianity, from in an American point of view, and some other cultures here, gets a bad rap. But if you look at that, what is to be said about why does Christianity get such a bad rap? And so, and then versus, in this case, the aspects of the origin of Christianity, changing the foundation of language in itself and how people communicate in itself, and that translating to another culture in the aspects of the development of the modern Polish language here. Okay, so again, like I've said in previous podcasts, media is really a breeding ground for the mainstream consensus of what is thought about certain subjects. And so when we get into Christianity, it's unfortunate, but a lot of Western imagery is not so kind and with the implement of Christianity. When that was a stark reality. And there, even some people have the aspects of saying, well, the 50s and so forth, that was such a long time ago. But in the grand scheme of history, not really. And it's remarkable the shift and change in dynamic. When you go 50s and so forth, the aspects of faith and family was very prevalent in the mainstream culture of how people thought about themselves and the aspects of their society. And so when you get on to, the 60s and so forth, that was the era of saying, hey, let's change the paradox here. Or not, well, let's make things, let's change the narrative here and make everything a paradox. Where let's change the imagery about what is understood and everything there is when you get into the concepts of Christianity and faith, even the aspects of Jesus. When you have the element of the hippie movement here, talking about free love and these things, and hey, and pushing the subtle agenda, but as the decade went on and on, transitioning to the 70s, moving out and being more progressive in the aspects of everyday life, being more concrete with building back to the aspects of family and work culture and everything. But having this notion that even Jesus, the way that he lived, he would be in the hippie embodiment, which is ludicrous, because it's going against and going and trying to change and radicalize the aspects of the fundamental principles of the Christian faith, of what the teaching of Jesus and the perceived imagery of him, and then even the aspects of the Old Testament, and then you go back into the foundation of that with God and his relationship with his people and everything and all of this. Now, no, I'm not. Can you please continue to play, baby? Please. It's not that cold. It's kind of warm, baby. Okay? Why don't you go sit down? Sit down. You want to sit down at the desk? Okay. And so, also on the same point of view with that aspect of is that talking about and attacking the faith of Christianity and changing, warping the idea of the Christian faith is doing that because they can, because there's no pushback and so forth. And so there's a lot to say about the distinction and the establishment of how things shift and embed themselves in the aspects of what was really profound in the new discovery of Christianity versus what is thought about Christianity in itself today. All right, so the earliest surviving records of single words in Polish date back to the 12th century, and the oldest known sentence in Polish appears in a book of the Hewiko from the 13th century. The language evolved from the dialects of, the Polish tribe and other related tribes with the Greater Polish, Lesser Polish. So the Sicilian dialect played a key role in shaping the standard literary language. So the development of Old Polish from the 10th to the 16th century was significantly influenced by Latin during the church and administration, and later by German, Czech, and other European languages during the Renaissance and the Enlightenment periods. All right, so let's dive in a little bit deeper from the AI response. So it says Polish language history. So the Polish language is officially a language in Poland where most of the Polish-speaking population resides. In fact, Poland is one of the most linguistically homogeneous countries globally. So around 97% of the population speak Polish. And hush, baby, hush. As their first language, and most of the remaining Poles learn Polish as a second language and can understand Polish words and phrases. So the Polish aspects of this is used and was more prominent after World War II. Millions of Polish people immigrated to countries such as the United Kingdom and the United States, Canada, Australia, and South America. It takes the global Polish-speaking population to around 50 million. So, moreover, it is the sixth most spoken language in the European Union, meaning that learning Polish benefits anyone wanting to work or study in Europe. Historically, the Polish language was just as important as it is today. So it serves as a lingua franca in Central and some parts of the Eastern Europe regions. So primarily in political and academic settings. And so, again, this also pinpoints to the aspects of how fundamentally influential politics and academics education is into the influence of what people think and see and how they communicate with each other. And so many terms and phrases, as you see now, has come out of mere aspects of people's different political views, whether good or bad. But in this instance, it's unfortunate it's more bad than good. And so many, you get the aspects of polarization being reused and rephrased in the aspects of political landscapes of talking about this. And you get the aspects of fight, or you get the aspects of fake news, and all these things span simply out of the aspects of these warped views and these not having a discourse in the aspects of political reasoning. And then you get titles like diplomats, like the UN. You get the Parliament. For the Parliament is quite different, with in the UK and in England versus the judicial system and the Constitution and everything else from the American standard of government. And you have governmental lockdowns, which is going on now, which is ridiculous. It's like, guys, come on. Have some kind of common ground. And, all of these, stalemate. You have gerrymandering. You have all these things. These words, these phrases come out of the aspects of how influential politics are into a culture. And then academia, peer research, peer review, cite sources, the list goes on, scholarly review, a Rhodes Scholar, you have a magna cum laude with the highest achievement of the was sought after when graduating from college. You have the discourse of the economic placement of workforce and being contributing to society. How does that work? City college versus a 4-year degree plan. Business school versus communication. Engineering, electrical engineering. There's so many realms of ideas and innovations that comes from the influence that academia has on society too. And out of that, you have really different aspects of words and languages that derive from it. And that in itself, again, shapes the aspects of language and how people communicate with one another. All right, so historically, the Polish language was just as important as it is today. I'm sorry, I said that already. So primarily in political and academic settings, it rose to prominence in the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, one of the largest countries in the 17th century Europe. So during this time, it was popular among royalty, so more and more people started speaking and learning Polish. Okay, so it says Polish language origin. So they also go into detail that it was around 500 AD, but it had split off into 3 distinct branches by 1000 AD. So these branches were the West Slavic, South Slavic, and the East Slavic. So adding, more of details to what I mentioned previously about the AI generated response. So Polish is a descent of the West Slavic branch, which was first emerging as the separation language of the 10th century when Poland was established as a state under the Pius dynasty. So the first version of the language in Poland was known as the Old Polish. During this linguistic period, lots of Polish words were adopted from Latin. So at the time, Latin was used for administrative purposes, as Polish was a Christian state and heavily influenced by Polish vocabulary. So all the Polish words were borrowed from Czech, another member of the West Slavic language family. Despite the use of Latin for official purposes, people continue to speak the Polish language in Poland day to day. So this led to Polish becoming an official language alongside Latin during the, excuse me for the pronunciation of this, the Jagiellonian era, which lasted around 1386 to 1569. So this coincided with the time Polish writing was established. So the first paper of Polish orthography was written in 1470 and published in 1513, and it flourished of Polish literature soon followed. So modern Polish language. From the 16th century, the Middle Polish era began. This period is widely regarded as the golden age of Polish literature. So, in the 16th century also, this was the era with the Polish-Lithuanian Commonwealth, which was established, covering the areas of modern-day Poland and Lithuania. So speaking the language became synonymous with with nobility as a result. More people started learning Polish, and this interest in the Polish continued to 1795 when Poland ceased to exist. Now in 1795, the sovereignty of Poland was split between Russia, Prussia, Austria, and Germany. Polish was no longer an official language anywhere in Europe. It was not until the end of the First World War that Poland became its own state again, and somehow the Polish language survived. Modern Polish was born and made the official language in Poland once more, and people even have been speaking Polish in the country ever since. So the writing system, despite Polish dating back to 500 AD, it is believed that the Polish alphabet started to be established in the 12th century. The earliest written sentences used Polish words, which was found in the 13th century. So the first book written entirely in Polish did not emerge until 1513. This is relatively late compared to other European languages. So the written system used for Polish language was based on the Latin alphabet. This makes sense considering that Latin was the administrative language in Poland. However, many Polish words and sounds that did not match Latin characters. So Polish also includes the letter Q, V, and Y. Let me say that again. It excludes the letters Q, V, and Y from its alphabet. So these sounds are not found in Polish words, so they were omitted from the official writing system. Therefore, the alphabet contains 32 letters in total. However, when learning Polish, you might come across words that use these omitted letters. These are all loan words adopted from foreign languages that have become part of everyday language in Poland. All right, so Polish translation and services. Let's end with this. Polish translations are high in demand, so this is due to the large Polish aspects of how Poland is seen in its global scene. So, seen it globally, and the importance of the Polish language in the EU. Although it is an official language in Poland, it is an important language across the planet. So if you need help translating Polish, contact Renaissance translators. As they say, this is the people who in themselves wrote this article here. All Polish translators are native language speakers, so they say that this ensures your translations are accurate and authentic, making it easy for you to communicate with Polish-speaking people across the globe. And then also to add on to this, let me say this too. Now, historically, there were many regional dialects of Poland with 7 neighboring countries that included Germany, the Bulgarians, Russia, Lithuania, Slovakia, the Ukraine, and Czechia. So the Polish language adopted many words from other prevalent European languages. So the regional dialects that emerged also had different pronunciations and grammatical rules. So all of these vernaculars are similar to one another. And you might hear a slight change in the accent when speaking Poland with someone from west compared to the east, but Polish words are grammatically fairly constant. Now, they also say this, however, the situation today is vastly different. Many traditional dialects were lost after World War II as the Polish borders were redrawn. So the forced migration of Polish families into Poland caused regional dialects to merge. There are only 4 major dialect languages in Poland today. So, I'm going to end on this. There's another thing that changes the shape of which people see themselves and how communication is thought of and how, everyday life is seen, which is war. Now, war can be unfortunate, but it's a necessary thing to do. And also that's unfortunate when it goes into, without saying the aspects, with how it's being distorted and how it's being perceived in the public discourse or the public conscious about war. And I think the most prevalent example, besides what's going on now, is the Vietnam War. Now, from the historical point of view of the Vietnam War, I think that was one of the most significant cases to understand and to have, a lot of case studies about that, and to continue to have case studies about that. How when merging views and people get confused about certain things and have preconceived notions about things, hold on, babe. Stop saying stuff like that, okay? Little girls. How the problems that come out of being okay with being irrational and not letting emotions evoke reactions to something, and having a disdain and a distaste towards the soldiers who are just, where most of them didn't understand what was going on themselves, and they're just trying to come back into civilization and then, just be a part of society again, and then, come back to a society who has a disdain towards them for an uncaused reason. And so this in itself formed a whole different vocabulary of the aspects about how war is perceived more negatively, and said, instead of, the band of brothers before the generation of Vietnam, when you go into Korean War and then, World War II and so forth, being part of servitude was a noble honor. And then that was the first instances when serving your country is a joke, it's something against our establishment of society. And then you get the words like Charlie and all these kind of things that span out of the aspects of talking about Vietnam War, and then the global concepts of the Viet Cong and everything, and how people perceive things. And this also in itself changes the way language is thought about and how people perceive war in itself. And that's also something to think about too when you consider the aspects of how language is developed, and in this case is quite different. When you talk about war and how that is developed in itself in the Polish language, and which is unfortunate because, when you there's good and bad into everything, and it's just unfortunate where the horrors of war is a real reality of the subject matter, and especially when you get in the aspects of war-torn countries. When you get, it's Slavic countries. There's so many examples of that, particularly, when we get into the aspects of going on into the 80s, and then, with the Desert Storm and the start of that, and all these other things that were going on in the 80s, and transition of all these other things that were happening. And then how people were, globally, more global connected to what was going on, and the implements, and how, people are impacted when war just doesn't proceed to end. There's no sort of common ground or resolution or something. People just continually fight, and just drag each other through the mud and do all these things, just devastate towns and villages and everything out of a call for, the reasons that they have to cause such destruction. And a lot of things can be learned from that. And, I can't stress enough the aspects of how it's far better to see things from objective. Oh, let me say that again. Tongue-tied this morning here. Sorry, y'all. Objective point of view, and to try to understand things and know why things are the way they are, instead of just, irrationally attacking. And then this is what it is, and there's no other way. And it removes the point of trying to understand the reason. And that in itself expands the aspects of language too, or discloses the aspects of the development of the flourishment of language. All right, so this reaches the end, and I can't stress enough feedback. Feel free to reach out. Tune in, turn up, and definitely take care. Bye-bye for now.